Hello and welcome back to this damn full idealistic crusade. This video is a review of the Film Preservation Society Blu-ray release of two extremely rare and nearly lost Douglas Fairbanks early silent classics, 1915's Double Trouble and 1918's Mr. Fix-It. These are absolute musts for any Fairbanks fans. There's so much of his style and charisma on display, even as early as we have here in 1915. And these are both films that were thought, practically impossible to be able to see for, really up until this restoration and this release happened. So these were films that you really just plain couldn't see. And unfortunately, one of the films, the earlier film, Double Trouble, does not exist in its entirety, so following the plot is a little bit on the difficult side, so do keep that in mind if you're coming to this release and seeing these films for the first time, which you most likely are because they just simply haven't been available. So this is a real treasure for Fairbanks fans, and of course the Film Preservation Society is to be commended for undertaking this. They are a wonderful nonprofit organization who is striving to help preserve silent cinema, and also did the incredible must-own release of The Three Musketeers in its newest restoration, which I have reviewed on its Blu-ray release, which I have here, so you can look at my review of that disc if you're interested in that film, which you should be because it's one of the silent masterpieces. Now to talk about the films themselves a little bit, Double Trouble from 1915 is very early for Fairbanks, and so you're getting that wonderful sense of seeing him this early in his career in a film that none of us have really ever seen outside of maybe a few stills or glimpses. Again, it doesn't exist in its entirety, but the gist of the film and what is the fun aspect of it is Doug essentially plays a character who's very mild-mannered and at some point gets a conk on the head and then suddenly apparently got another conk on the head many years later and wakes up to find that he spent a significant chunk of his life that he doesn't remember as this nefarious, very evil and nasty businessman, and then various things happen to cause him to switch back and forth between the two different psyches. Now, this is a very old, cliched trope in terms of storytelling nowadays for us. I think the thing most people might jump to are all the many different comic stories that this happened in, or especially in the realm of Batman, it happened many times, most notably with the character of King Tut in the Batman 66 series, where you have the mild-mannered professor of Egyptology, but every time he gets a conk on the head, he's suddenly a super criminal who thinks he is the reincarnation of King Tut. Well, sort of that same kind of idea is what you have here, and of course every time he reawakens, he has amnesia about the other character. So again, this film doesn't exist in its entirety, so don't go in expecting a fully fledged narrative. It's just a miracle we even have this version that was able to be presented on this Blu-ray disc and have this preserved of very early Fairbanks. And I think for Fairbanks fans like myself, you get a lot out of this that you're able to read into, and you get to see Fairbanks put in all these fun situations, but that's the main draw of this. So it's not a quote-unquote great silent film. It's just really a treasure that we even have some form of it to look at and actually see Fairbanks in this type of interesting dual role, getting to play with that at this point very early in his career. The second film, which is thankfully here in its entirety, has also been very rare, and the only known source of it was what was used for this restoration. That's 1918's Mr. Fix-It, which was directed by Alan Dwan, who directed Fairbanks many times and a number of really great films. But this is a charming little film where essentially Fairbanks plays a young character who decides he's going to help his friend out. They're away at school in another country, and he wants to marry this girl, but he knows his family would never stand for him marrying outside of his class, essentially. They're a very snooty and stuck-up sort of bunch, and he'd lose his inheritance and things. So, of course, Doug, being Doug, immediately, without a thought, just says, "Oh, I'll fix it." And that becomes the catchphrase of the film. And so he goes back to the States, and he pretends to be his friend, because, of course, many years had passed while they were away at school. And so he plays out this charade of dealing with a very snooty family, But things keep piling up, and of course, he says his catchphrase many times, "I'll fix it." And over the process of trying to smooth things over for his friend, he winds up sort of warming the hearts of the snooty and stodgy that he comes across and manages to start fixing their lives. So this again is a sort of storytelling cliche that we are very used to now, but seeing it at this point in 1918 and with Fairbanks at his most typical exuberant, it's just wonderfully charming, even though you know the beats that are coming and where the story's kind of going to go. But it does have a couple of nice surprises thrown in, and there's a wonderful sense of heart and charm. And Doug even does some of his wonderful athletics and acrobatics, which you wouldn't necessarily expect in a story like this, but that doesn't stop him from, walking down a staircase backwards or having a bunch of kids pile on top of him while he's doing endless handstands and things. So that adds to the wonderful charm of this film. So it's very well put together. You can tell somebody like Alan Dwan was directing, and somebody who had a really great rapport with Fairbanks. So you will definitely notice the shift in tone, and that this film feels so much more alive than what you see in Double Trouble coming just a few years beforehand. Of course, it helps that the film is here in its entirety, or at least it's not missing giant chunks like the other film is. So it's a bit of an unfair comparison in that way. But this is the main draw. This is a really lovely Fairbanks classic vehicle from this time period, and was one of his most successful films while he was at the Artcraft Company. So it's really a thing to celebrate that we have both of these films now on a physical release for fans to purchase and look at, because they have not been available. They were really getting to the point where they would be technically considered lost, and again, had not this single source turned up for Mr. Fix-It, we would not have had this even possible. And apparently that source has now disappeared again, which is crazy, but that is unfortunately the going to happen in the realm of silent film preservation, and so many our films are in such bad status in terms of their preservation status. So again, it's a reason to celebrate that you can have any sort of reissue or restoration or presentation of a very hard to see or very obscure silent film, regardless of how complete it is, or regardless of the means at which you get to see it. Any sort of silent release is a treasure and something to celebrate. Now, that brings us to the Film Preservation Society Blu-ray, which is available from their website, and it is also sold in certain bundles when they do sales and things. So it is wonderful to be able to support a nonprofit organization. That means usually this is definitely a bit pricier than your standard mass-produced Blu-ray, and you can't order it from other retailers. You have to order it from their website directly. But this is a must for any Fairbanks fans. This is well produced in terms of the disc and packaging, just like the Three Musketeers Blu-ray that they did, which I also reviewed. So it's pretty much the same thing. You order from their website. Now, to talk about the picture quality of these two films, this is where we run into a bit of a problem, and something I also had to talk a little bit about in my review of the Three Musketeers Blu-ray. Now, on that release, the film restoration was done in conjunction with the San Francisco Silent Film Festival, who had done a previous restoration a couple years before. That was the foundation of the new work done. But when you looked at the Biograph shorts that the FPS had restored themselves, they had, while it was great to see them restored, they had gone in and apparently hit them with a lot of noise reduction, and they have really big frozen grain halos, and they just, unfortunately, while they have been cleaned up, it's kind of a bit overdone, and to say that is an understatement. So when I came to this release, I also saw that it had other Biograph shorts they had restored as extras. I was hoping it wouldn't be the same sort of scenario with the shorts that were included as extras. Unfortunately, not only is that also here as an issue, but the actual features themselves have been treated in the same way. So when you see these, obviously they are going to have plenty of printed in damage that is just inherent to the source, and that's to be expected. That any silent film lover knows what they're getting into with any sort of silent film that has barely survived to this point, and you're just doing the best you can with a restoration. Well, what's happened here is the same stuff that they did with the Biograph shorts, because this was handled by the FPS themselves, and unfortunately, it seems like somebody has gotten a bit too carried away with what's available in the modern restoration toolbox. So when you look at both of these films, it's rather unfortunate, because the strengths of the restoration and the scans of the surviving print elements are kind of undercut significantly by the fact that there is severe DNR at times, and there are severe frozen grain halos around objects and people, to the point of, because these sources have all the printed in damage and things, sometimes you'll see Doug moving around, like in Mr. Fix-It, especially when he's running through the big house, the big mansion of the family, because of the scratches and things that are printed in. Sometimes that is stuck in the frozen grain halo, so Doug will be running across a room, and you'll see not just a frozen grain halo, but you'll see the actual scratches and things follow him, but then the rest of the image has been scrubbed clean. So it's really hard for me to recommend this, because it's so incredibly important for these films and their preservation status. And I know the FPS has all the best intentions in the world, and they're a nonprofit organization and everything, and I want to support them. But this is just like what happened with the Biograph shorts they've included as extras on both this and their Three Musketeers release. So it's really unfortunate, because it's amazing to have these films preserved. But when you see the clips they include, because they have a little short restoration documentary piece, they include basically clips of how it looked before all their cleanup was done. And you see images from these same scans with all the natural grain intact and without DNR and frozen grain halos and things. And it looks great. It looks wonderful. And it's like, could I just get it that way? So that's the big elephant in the room I have to get out of the way first. That is the big drawback of this release, which is really going to be off-putting to some if you go in and you're not expecting anything like this in a silent film restoration. But unfortunately, that's how these films have been treated, so you will have to live with that. And these are really the only releases of these films, and these are the most complete and the best surviving elements, and really the only surviving elements, which makes this an even greater shame, because I really wish they had just left them alone and not felt the need to go to that level of cleanup and processing work, because it obviously was extra work and took extra time, but it really undoes these having the best new scans possible. And had it been like the Three Musketeers, where the restoration work was primarily handled with other entities, essentially, I think it would have been like that disc, where the features would have been fine, and it would have been just the Biograph shorts that apparently, I guess, somebody at the Society is doing the cleanup and is getting way too heavy-handed on certain elements of the digital cleanup toolbox. So unfortunately, I can't recommend this for the picture quality, simply due to those really glaring issues. And again, they are really apparent from the first frames, the first shots of either one of these features. And that is not anything to do with the preservation status or the printed in damage and things like that no restoration could really overcome with a silent film, where it's amazing any version has survived. So you're going to have to get over that or live with that just severe usage of DNR and frozen grain halos out the wazoo that run throughout both features, and unfortunately really significantly mar the presentations. I mean, it is really bad. So much so that I'm starting to wonder if anyone even realized this is how they turned out. I certainly hope that it's not somebody thinking that's a good thing, because it's not at all. So videophiles, beware. It's really major, and it really undoes a lot of the qualities of the restoration work, unfortunately. So that's the big problem here. And this also extends, unfortunately, to the Biograph shorts that they have included as extras from their restoration projects. So I really hope someone at FPS rethinks this and stops you doing these practices. This is something that happens more and more as home video goes on and gets into higher resolutions, but it's really apparent when you watch these upscaled to 4K, because I watched this on my OLED television and it was pretty unbearable, if I'm honest. So it wouldn't look so bad if I was watching on an older TV, but I think the only way I could really make these look more presentable is if I watch them on my HD CRT, which would hide a little bit of that more in 1080i. But you'd still have to just grit your teeth and live with it anyway. It's very unfortunate this has happened. So I hope going forward they don't do that this type of extraordinarily invasive DNR usage anymore, because it's really unfortunate. Other than that, the picture quality on both films is very much limited to the quality of the surviving sources. So you have to expect scratches, damage, inherent wear, frame weaving, all kinds of things are going to pop up. But that's simply due to this being the only source there is, and this is the best that can be done. So again, any silent film lover will know for a film with very compromised sources, and when you only have a single source for each film, this is really the best that can be done. Now, Double Trouble fares the worst because it is the older film. It has a number of places where there are unfortunately some missing frames. Nothing terrible, but that is to be expected. Again, there is inherent damage throughout, but that is understandable considering that this is the best and only known source that really survives. There are a couple places where there is a quality drop off, where I guess they found another little source to substitute in here and there. So even though it's a shorter feature in terms of what survives, you will have points at which it does cut to a noticeably lesser quality source. But this is simply all that really exists is these two sort of inherent sources, I guess. Or it was in the source they had where it just cut to a lesser quality bit of dupe material or something that was in there. So you will have to expect that as well. It's really a miracle this survives. There are a couple other spots where there is some really particularly bad or large damage, but that was really unavoidable. The FPS did create brand new intertitles, so all the titles are brand new. They do look a little soft and maybe a little bit lower in terms of the resolution factor, but they're still wonderfully presentable and very clear, and it's nice that they actually created new titles and inserted here, because not every restoration takes the time to do that properly. They also have a little FPS logo in the corner to, sort of copyright this as their restoration, which is understandable, and at least they're unobtrusive and only in the titles and not in the actual film, which is something I really find rather frustrating, and it does sort of take me out of the movie when they put the actual new logo somewhere in the corner of the actual film. So it's just on the intertitles, thankfully, and that's understandable, because a lot of silent film companies put their logos on the actual titles. Mr. Fix-It, unfortunately, has a lot of the same issues in terms of it does have quite a bit of inherent damage. It has quite a number of missing frames all over. So again, it's not, and of course, obviously not going to be a pristine, fully restored presentation. This is more of a preservation copy of the best known elements. It does have color tinting, and the tinting is nicely done. Most of the titles are brand new or newly constructed, and they look pretty good. Again, a little soft, and they do include some logos in them to help copyright this. This was a restoration also done in collaboration with the San Francisco Silent Film Society and the George Eastman House. So there were a lot of people involved here to try and restore this film. But again, do understand that while it does look better than Double Trouble, it still has a lot of the same issues, which will of course be inherent to any silent film with a very compromised history and very compromised surviving elements. Again, there's apparently only one element of this film that has apparently vanished again, which is really amazing when they talk about it, but unfortunately that's just how it has happened, and this is really the best there is. Apparently they were able to cobble this together from two different elements. One at the Museum of Modern Art, unfortunately rotted, and then the other was this rather nice Italian print source, and that's the one they were able to use that then apparently has now vanished again. So silent films are never easy, but you don't often, or at least you only sometimes read about print sources that turn up and then magically disappear again, and no one knows what happened to them. So you are going to need to expect things like scratches and some light fluctuation and some wobble, and all kinds of different things are going to pop up here, but it's nothing out of the ordinary for any sort of silent film that's more of a preservation element that's been made, a preservation master, when the sources available are extraordinarily limited. That makes the fact that it's been hit with the massive amount of noise reduction and frozen grain halos even worse, because you could really tell this was, for all the inherent damage and things, it's quite good looking, and of course is in much better shape overall than Double Trouble, which doesn't even exist in its full form. So it's just a shame that these are very much marred by the DNR usage and the massive frozen grain halos and things. So again, videophiles beware. Everybody else, it's something you're going to have to just live with and grit your teeth and get through it. But it's really unfortunate that these films are marred by this factor, and this is really the only version that exists for both of them. And it's a shame, because all the effort was there and the best intent was there, but the end result is this very much marred video that just really, you have to just try and look past it the whole time. And if you're a videophile, it's going to bug the absolute crap out of you, because the DNR usage is really bad, and it runs throughout both features. They both do have nice new scores, so at least on the score side of things, the musical accompaniment is really well done for both. In terms of the packaging, it's nicely done with original posters for both films in the same nice keep case as Three Musketeers. If I can get the glare off of it, sorry. Then the rear is nicely done, straightforward, just like Three Musketeers. The interior is well done. We have both film images on the disc. We have a rather nice internal bit of art with original press and ad material for both films, and a wonderful booklet, just like Three Musketeers, where Tracy Gossel, who wrote a wonderful Fairbanks biography, writes a wonderful bit of historical background for both of the films, with lovely images and press materials and poster images. And then there is also a write-up for both of the Biograph shorts that are included as extras. And this is the main sort of attraction as well, because you're getting these restored versions of two Biograph shorts, and it's part of their ongoing Biograph restoration project, which is, of course, incredibly important to the history and development of cinema, but is unfortunately kind of undone by the same video problems that I discussed in the Fairbanks features and in the Biograph shorts on the extras of the Three Musketeers disc. So unfortunately, those same problems have now extended to the actual feature films in this release. So that's why I'm thinking it has to be something on their end, or I don't even know if it's somehow in whoever actually makes and manufactures the actual Blu-ray side of things. But it's really unfortunate, because they're doing incredible work. Here, the Biograph shorts included are Her First Biscuits, which is apparently Mary Pickford's first filmed performance, and then the final short that D.W. Griffith did for Biograph, The Adopted Brother, which is from 1913, and both have new, rather lovely scores. So they're incredibly important historically. They're still wonderfully enjoyable to watch, but as a videophile, you're going to be sitting there gritting your teeth the whole time because of the massive DNR that's going on, and everything just has this terribly flat look to it that is really unfortunate, because I'm sure the raw scans looked perfectly fine. You do get the restoration documentary I mentioned before. It's a couple minutes. And when you look at it, you can actually see a few glimpses of how the transfers for the two Fairbanks films here looked before they did the DNR pass on them, and they looked perfectly fine. In fact, they look great. There's even a little short, tiny bit of double trouble where it looks fantastic, and all the grains there, and nothing's wrong. And then they show the comparison, and it's like, no, what did you do? It was fine. So that's, again, that really just underlines the fact that these have unfortunately been noise managed and noise reduced to absolute death, which is such an incredible shame. And then the extras include with another really substantial image gallery, just like what was on the Three Musketeers disc. So there are wonderful extras here, but unfortunately, in spite of the work that went into them with the best of intentions, just like the two incredibly rare Fairbanks feature films on this release, all of the video quality of all of the feature film content and the Biograph shorts and the extras package are incredibly marred, if not ruined, by the terrible usage of DNR and frozen grain halos everywhere. It is really terrible. It makes the images look really flat, and you can see that they looked fine in the restoration little comparison, the few little glimpses we get. So again, I'm not exactly sure who's responsible for this, but whoever it is, I hope they lay off the DNR button from now on and just do these exactly as is in terms of how the scans come in, with just minimal cleanup wherever possible, and then just keep it hands off, because this is such an incredibly important release. It's still a must-own title for Fairbanks fans and all silent film lovers, but the video quality is really terribly marred, and I cannot recommend this for the picture quality, and it has nothing to do with the preservation status being very limited on these actual surviving print elements of these silent films. It has nothing to do with that at all. It is entirely due to the massive amount of DNR that was used in the feature transfer and in the extras, and also the huge frozen grain halos. It's so bad that this could literally be a textbook example of DNR and frozen grain halos. And if you watch this upscaled to 4K, it's going to be even worse, particularly if you did what I did, which is watch it on your 4K OLED television. And it's just going to be rubbing your face in it the whole time. So unfortunately, I can only recommend this release for the incredible historical value of these films and the fact that they have been at least preserved in this way, and you can actually view them on physical media and support the wonderful nonprofit organization of the Film Preservation Society. That's the only reason I would recommend this. And it's also because it's a nonprofit and it's a Blu-ray release, and you're having to custom order it from them. It's a bit pricey. So that makes the video problems really just a bit more infuriating, because you had to pay more to support the incredible work they're doing, but that incredible work is being ruined at the end of things because the video processing is so bad that it really undoes a lot of the great work that's being done by the FPS. So again, I hope they catch on to this and stop doing that, because it really just mars the whole experience. So I can only recommend this for the incredible historical value, or this is of course a must for all Fairbanks fans if you haven't checked this out already, but do go in knowing that the video quality is unfortunately extraordinarily poor due to the incredible amount of DNR that was used. It is just a crying shame, because you could see how good these scans looked beforehand in the little restoration clip they have. So I can't recommend this release for the picture quality. It is quite poor due to the unfortunate decision to use a massive amount of digital noise reduction, which is just, again, a crying shame. So those are my thoughts on the Film Preservation Society release of the double feature of very rare early Douglas Fairbanks feature films, 1915's Double Trouble and 1918's Mr. Fix-It. Again, this is a must for Fairbanks fans and all silent film lovers, but do go in knowing that the picture quality is extraordinarily poor due to the just insane amounts of noise reduction that's been used here. In fact, it's so much so, and it looks so scrubbed clean, that Even though it's a Blu-ray and I'm watching it on a 4K television, it almost looks smeary like an old VHS tape. That's the type of level of noise reduction that's going on here. And I hope the screen caps I've included at least give you an idea of what's been done here. And I hate saying this because I really think the FPS is doing wonderful work and I want to support them wherever possible, but I can't not say something about this type of extreme level of noise reduction and noise management in the video realm. It's really horrible, and it undoes all of the great aspects of the work that's been done with these films. And you can compare it with the little glimpse you see in the restoration documentary and see that it was perfectly fine beforehand. You can also compare this to the FPS Blu-ray of The Three Musketeers, which has the beautiful transfer of the restoration of the feature film, but then has these same problems on the FPS restored Biograph shorts. You can also see other Fairbanks films that were in terrible shape and had to be even reconstructed, but they were left alone on the Kino Lorber double feature of The Half-Breed with The Good Bad Man, which are beautifully photographed by Victor Fleming when he was a cinematographer still. And those have not been noise managed at all, and they have beautiful grain structure, even in spite of the inherent damage and the restoration work that was very difficult to do. So looking at either of these can show you what restorations and preservations of early Fairbanks classics can look like if they haven't been hit with the crazy amount of noise reduction that happened, unfortunately, on this release. So again, I really had to say something because it is really bad. In fact, it's some of the worst DNR and frozen grain halos I've ever seen on a Blu-ray release. That's how bad this is. And it's the same problem that was on the Biograph shorts in the extras section of the Three Musketeers release. So it's really unfortunate, and I can only recommend this release to diehard Fairbanks fans and silent film fans just because of how bad the video problems are. So you will have to take that into consideration if you're considering purchasing this release. And again, I don't want to get people to not support the FPS and the great work they're doing because they are a small nonprofit and they're really trying hard. It makes me feel bad because they're putting all this effort in and it's getting ruined in the end result by just this insane amount of noise reduction that's going on. So again, I hope they catch on to this, and however this is happening, I hope it gets eradicated because they are doing great work and they do need your support. So please do go look at their website, which I have a link in the description, and support the preservation and the saving of silent cinema, which needs all the help it can get. I hate that this is such great effort that is so terribly marred in the end result. So that's why the Blu-ray is really one that you're going to have to definitely think about before you purchase it, or maybe purchase it in one of their sales or as part of one of their bundles with their other great releases to maybe offset the issues you're going to run into with the very poor picture quality due to the excessive noise management. So unfortunately, I know that's a negative note to end on, but I wanted to stress that because that's what you're going to run into. And I had no clue of this going in, but I thought the Biograph shorts might have a problem like the ones on the Musketeers Blu-ray did. But unfortunately, this is now extended to the features. So this is a very difficult recommendation because the films themselves are great. It's amazing that they're preserved in any way, but it's going to be a very, very difficult watch if you're at all sensitive to noise reduction because, again, this is some of the worst I've ever seen, period. It is really bad. So again, do go look at the Society's website. Do pick up a copy of their Three Musketeers Blu-ray, which is, I think, the silent film release of 2022 and a must-own title. But if you're going to look at their other Fairbanks release, do know that the video quality is extraordinarily poor due to the unfortunate incredible use of massive amounts of noise reduction. So again, this is a tough sell, but I do think these films are very, very important, and they're an absolute must for Fairbanks fans. You will get so much out of seeing these, and the Society is doing great work. I just wish it wasn't marred in this way in the final product, unfortunately. So I can't really recommend this Blu-ray unless you are a diehard silent film fan or a diehard Fairbanks fan, because the video quality is so poor. I know that sounds terrible, but there are still positives here, and at least getting these films out in some way is something to be treasured and celebrated. It's just unfortunate it's in quality this poor due to the decision to apply such noise management. So as always, I hope my babblings about classic films and physical media releases have been at least somewhat fun and informative. And as always, do keep supporting both studio labels and boutique labels by buying films on disc to help keep both film culture and physical media alive. And thank you ever so much for watching.